The Astartes maintained fleets of space vessels for both transport and combat, with the warship composition varying between each chapter. Early on during the Great Crusade, Space Marine vessels served in combined battle fleets alongside other Imperial forces, including the Navy, using battleships, grand cruisers and heavy cruisers, but after the Horus Heresy, the Codex Astartes was implemented and limited their access to the larger ship classes. There was a debate over denying them vessels entirely, but a compromise was reached mainly due to the decentralized nature of the Codex itself and the need for mobility for the Emperor's super soldiers. Thus, they were said to be limited to vessels primarily for transport, delivery, and suppression or to facilitate a planetary assault. However, that was just theory and politics. The reality was quite different. They have quite a lot of warships. The strength of the Astartes fleet come in the form of gigantic warships known as the battle barges. And this is why we are gathered here today to discuss. We will take a full look at their origins, the size, speed, design, engines, weapons, crew, space marine attachments, and more. The origins of these iconic battle barges trace back to the Great Crusade, which was a time period of expansion for the Imperium, a time when the Emperor himself walked amongst men. During this glorious era, the need for military vessels capable of enduring the dangers of rail space and the warp led to the development of various warship classes, more often than not requiring the Mechanicum, as it was known back then, to go through data slates and available STCs on forge worlds to bring forth these classes of voidships, and among these were the battle barges, which is really a term not limited to a single class of ship, but often encompassing any battleship variant or warship that had been retrofitted for use by the Legiones Astartes as by their needs. These ships were redesigned and reconfigured for Space Marine planetary assaults, and also for ship-to-ship boarding actions. As stated just now, the battle barges have no specific class and are mainly reconfigured battleships, cruisers and other warships modified to fit the requirements of the Space Marine chapter. The battle barges such as the Eternal Crusader of the Black Templars has a defined length of 10 kilometers, while the Macrach's Honor and the Invincible Reason, which are both Gloriana-class battleships, are also termed as battle barges of the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels respectively. These ships are said to be easily over 20 kilometers in length, and they rival the size of the Ark Mechanicus, excluding the Speranza of course. But for this video's sake, we will take in the median acknowledged size of the battle barges, which are around 8 kilometers in length, which is still quite an impressive size for an Imperial warship. As for speed, we shall take a look at that in a minute when we discuss the plasma drive of these massive ships. The battle barge follows a similar standardized ship design layout which is common for all Imperial ships, but still unique in its own way. It has a hammerhead-shaped prow, followed by a bow fitted with all types of sensors, also weapon systems and tubes. This is followed by a very long deck and keel in the middle which looks like a neck, and in this part the massive macro cannons and the bombardment cannons are fitted. After this we reach the starboard, that is made in the shape of a massive set of cathedrals akin to that seen on top of the god engines or the titans. It is here that we find the bridge, which is the place where the captain and the main command crew function to keep the ship going through the void. Just behind the bridge we find the navigator's tabernacle, which also houses the warp drive and the majority of the sensor arrays. Now lastly, at the stern, which is the backside of the ship, lies the plasma engines, which are powered by the plasma drives inside the hull of the ship. On a side note, the battle barge can also serve as a fortress monastery and some sort of a chapter homeworld for certain Space Marine chapters that are fleet-based, meaning that these Astartes treat that ship as sacred to them as the planet Baal or Macrach is to the Blood Angels and the Ultramarines respectively. These battle barges, like all Imperial warships, were designed to have Gothic cathedral themes and possesses many sharp points, arches, domes and towers. But these are not just for tradition or for looking badass, as they also serve as nodal points for sensors and communications. One common feature amongst all Imperial Navy ships is the armored prow, seen with reinforced plasteel and adamantium, and with hundreds of meters thick, especially on the battle barges. This prow doubles as a ram and is capable of deflecting all but the most powerful strikes to the vessel's bow. The battle barge is also equipped with thick adamantium-plated armor over even thicker layers of plasteel to deflect direct weapon impacts on its hull. The thickness and strength of this armor vary based on the ship size and the type of ship. For example, a smaller escort ship might have just a foot thick of outer hull armor, while an Imperial battleship and a battle barge could have 3 layers of heavily reinforced plasteel and adamantium armor, totaling dozens of meters in thickness. This creates a superstructure that is as tough and durable as anything the Xenos and other factions possess in their arsenal. There are also 2 other protective layers that we find in Imperial ships, and of course, the same on these battle barges. The first is the void shield, which are crucial protective barriers for starships, creating an invisible layer of energy that absorbs radiation, interstellar dust, particle showers, and even weapon impacts. These shields are amongst the most advanced and sophisticated the Imperium has as of the current era. The shields are divided into several zones that can siphon energy from one to another in case a segment is under heavy attack or about to fail. For this shield and the overall powering of the entire ship's system, there is a centralized reactor that is required. All of it is powered by fusion-based plasma drives. These drives occupy a significant portion of the aft section, comprising drive tubes, engine compartments, and plasma reactors. The plasma engine nozzles at the stern of the ship are also powered by the reactor and can power a battle barge up to 3/4 the speed of light after days of constant acceleration, as was seen in the case of the Einstein, which is a phalanx, but the battle barges could also hit that speed if they needed to. But normally in the void, they travel in the speeds of between tens to hundreds of kilometers per second. And of course, for interstellar travel, most Imperial Navy ships use warp drives to breach the barrier between rail space and the Imperium, going through the soul dimension and emerging out in rail space with minimal time consumption. These warp drives are massive pieces of technology and are surrounded by navigators who plot the shortest path to the destination after entering the Mandeville Point, and also plotting that by using the Astronomicon as a lighthouse or a source point. So this brings us to the other protective layer, which is called the Gellar field. This field emits a strange and powerful force field made out of a yet unknown type of subatomic particle, one that can maintain a bubble of rail space-time around a starship traveling through the warp. This field prevents entities native to the Imperium from breaching into the ship, ensuring the vessel's safety during warp travel, in essence bringing portions of rail space into warp space. But without the Gellar field, the ship is in critical danger, as warp entities could easily invade the ship. They could be as benign as lost souls or as dangerous as greater demons of the Chaos Gods. Now let's take a look at the human element of the ship before going back to the mechanical aspects, including the vehicles and weapons of the battle barge. Let's take a look at the crew and personnel. So Imperial battleships of the same size can have crews anywhere between 25,000 to 3 million men or more, depending on the mission and class of ship. This includes a large number of Imperial Navy armsmen, or also known as the Voidsmen-in-Arms, to defend against enemy boarding actions. The warriors of the Adeptus Astartes are too rare and too valuable to be tasked with performing the menial functions required to operate the ship. Instead, they act as officers, overseeing the ranks of servitors and chapter serfs who carry out the ship's tasks, performing all of the menial and manual processes required. Normally, the ship would have a master or a mistress in the place of a captain, and then a throne like that of a god engine, a tech priest, a first mate, and weapon specialist, and so on, with also Space Marine officers side by side. The majority of the tasks would be carried out by servitors and lesser crewmen, and then there would be tens of thousands of Voidsmen-at-Arms, as well as chapter support staff armed to the teeth. But all of these number of people on board are deemed next to no value in comparison to the 3 companies of Space Marines that are priceless, meaning 300 on board. Aside from the crew and personnel, the battle barge can also carry quite a number of different aircrafts and void crafts which have different functions, from assisting in ship-to-ship combat, boarding actions, transport, strike missions, and providing close air support. A battle barge would on average possess 2 to 3 squadrons of Thunderhawk multi-role aircrafts, which can function as dropships, gunships, and bombers. It can also carry the same amount of squadrons of either Storm Eagles or Storm Talons, and sometimes the rarer Storm Ravens, which are gunships. For air superiority, they would dispatch 2 squadrons of Stormhawks, which are replacements for the Crusade-era Xiphon interceptors. since Space Marines and other high-value members are dropped onto a planet via Thunderhawks. The heavy weapons of war, which include tanks, dreadnoughts, speeders and artillery pieces, are transported by heavy bulk landers. And then lastly, a battle barge is not a battle barge if it doesn't have rapid response equipment for the Astartes in the form of the orbital drop pods, which carry squads of Space Marines into the thick of battle via orbital insertion. While the heavy equipment mentioned just now are mainly for air-to-air and air-to-ground combat, meaning planetary assaults, there are another group of vehicles that are found on board of a battle barge that perform the most important task amongst them all. And this is boarding in ship-to-ship combat. A battle barge is by all intents and purposes mainly an assault ship, and in void combat it relies more on getting up close to the enemy vessel and unleashing its deadly payload of Astartes than shooting from longer distances with heavy weaponry. There are three modes of delivery. First is by the silent and deadly boarding torpedoes, which carry just a few battle brothers at once, and these are less maneuverable than the larger assault crafts but are smaller, and so their chances of being shot down are significantly lesser. For a shock assault requiring a larger and deadlier force, the Caestus assault ramps are employed, and once the enemy shields are down and the battle barge is in very close proximity, the Astartes simply use teleportation technology to come on board to the enemy ship and finish off the crew. In void combat, as the battle barge closes in on an enemy ship, it uses weapons batteries like plasma projectors, macro laser cannons, missile racks and fusion beamers to strip a target's shields and overwhelm its defenses. But if boarding is not feasible, a battle barge will use its bombardment cannons to tear the enemy craft apart. These weapons, while primarily for orbital support, are effective against enemy warships as well, but they need to be really close, as these bombardment cannons have a lesser range than the other weapons. They shoot out the magma shells and inferno shells, which erupt on impact, stripping away plating and shredding armor, confusing defenses and allowing for successful boarding actions. Well, if the boarding actions are needed. So these battle barges, like any other large Imperial warship, have these massive visible macro cannons perched on the two sides of the keel. It again has quite a few macro cannons coupled with torpedo tubes on the prow of the ship. Then there are the numerous batteries of plasma projectors, fusion beamers and missile launchers perching all over the deck of the ship, with point defense lasers, flak cannons and other smaller caliber weapons found all over to defend the ship from smaller crafts and swarming enemies. The previously mentioned large bombardment cannons also serve as the primary orbital space-to-ground assault weapons, which are used sparingly to target planetary defense lasers and batteries as well as anti-aircraft systems to provide a safe route for the Space Marines to enter the world and perform their duties. These bombardment cannons can utilize magma shells, but also can shoot quite a wide array of different weaponry like vortex shells, inferno shells, and melter shells. These cannons can also be used to bomb enemy positions and large enemy formations as well as attack other void ships in space. But the most dangerous of all these weapons that a battle barge has and is authorized to use are the Exterminatus level weapons, in the form of the cyclonic torpedo, the atmosphere incinerator, and the virus bombs. And with that, we leave this video and this battle barge to rest and recuperate. So if you like this video, then watch this other one as well, and if you want to browse for other Warhammer content, then check out our channel. Subscribe, like for support, and bang on that bell icon for notifications on new video uploads. Till the next time, take care, boys.